Hi, I'm Jack Baruzzini, and you're listening to The Secret to Stargate, where we talk about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. And joining me today are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father.
Howdy, Jack.
And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hi, Jack.
Today we are discussing the 10th episode of Season 7, Birthright. In a battle on an alien planet, SG-1 encounters a tribe of female Jaffa warriors seeking to help against the parasitic Goa'uld. Led by Ishta, they offer a refuge for girls condemned by Teal'c to be burned in sacrifice. But their fight for freedom comes at a cost. As tensions rise between both the village and between Teal'c and Ishta, Tritonin offers hope for liberation without the symbiotes, forcing all parties to confront their choices and face the consequences of their rebellion. What were your thoughts on this episode, Father?
This isn't too bad. This is a Teal'c-centric episode. We get to see. I love the line about. He even says I've spoken more in 2 days than I have in years. And it's like,
Yeah.
That had to be a poke at the other writers because this was written by Christopher Judd. So this had to be a poke at the other writers who give him nothing to say. So that was great. It's a plot development. We see more, the Free Jaffa movement growing, with these new warriors, these Amazon warriors. Again, another nice little line to sneak in there. And this is where Teal'c gets it on with DePaul.
The apostrophes going on there.
Yep.
What about you, Victor?
Yeah, I like it. It's a good kind of Planet of the Week episode, a good Teal'c episode. There's a lot of talking, a lot of time spent in tents. It's an intense episode, I guess. It's fine. I wish we would have heard more about this group of Jaffa later on. I don't know that we necessarily
we do see him again.
We do see him again. Good. I'm not remembering that, but it is good that we do.
Let me rephrase that. Ishta, we see again.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, I liked it. It was, some good themes about, the child sacrifice and them being against it, which is always good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think there's some themes we can dig into as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's Moloch's signature thing, both as an actual pagan deity and I guess here as a Goa'uld. So,
yep, exactly.
Yeah, I liked it. It was fun to see a different angle on the Jaffa, so we get a deeper look into their culture. It is interesting that it seems like most Goa'uld, except for Moloch, seem to have a very patriarchal setup to their Jaffa warriors, where the men are just the warriors, and then you have the women being kind of a secondary backup. So It's interesting to see that, and can imagine nowadays some people would be calling out Teal'c for his patriarchal attitude.
Yeah. The Jaffa is a woman?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that they're addressing the issues of the fact that now that Jaffa are free, they still are dependent upon the Goa'uld symbiotes, and what's going to happen when they start dying off, or in this case, these girls who are rescued from the sacrifices, because basically Moloch has decided that he doesn't want any new female Jaffa, only males, so all the females are ritually sacrificed to him, which is much like what actually happened in Carthage, which was a horrible, awful thing. And fortunately, Carthage has been
Delenda Ested?
Yeah, it has been Delenda Ested. There we go. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Burnt to the ground and seasoned with salt.
The earth. Yep. Like some good fries.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting, and I like that they bring up the point of how when you start killing off a large amount of your population, especially of one sex, you end up with demographic issues later down the line. But they do address that with the fact that the Jaffa are so long-lived. I still think you're setting up some problems because people can only live for so long, but it's good they address that.
Well, especially since how many of them do they lose every time they go in battle against another Goa'uld system lord?
Yeah.
They might live naturally long, but they're constantly in battles against other system lords and invading planets and so on. So
Yeah, definitely. And it is interesting that we get the twist here where these female Jaffa, their whole thing is they've got all these girls secreted away on this planet, and to get them as they reach puberty, they have to get the symbiote, otherwise they're going to die. And so they go out, they basically kill any Jaffa they can find who are serving a Goa'uld system lord. They take their symbiote and they bring it back to put in the girls, and that sets up that whole issue of probably a lot of these guys don't really want to be serving the Goa'uld, but
well, and that's the whole point of them experimenting with the Tritonin on them, because up to this point, the only people that are on this were Teal'c and Braytak.
Mm-hmm.
But now they've got more people they can experiment with it on, and find out that it's not 100%, it's not perfect, but it's better than the option.
Yeah, skip the clinical trials or whatever, and went right on to the field testing. Now, something I wasn't clear on with this episode was, is it true for all Jaffa that we've seen that when they come of age, they need a symbiote, or were these ones just genetically modified in some way? Because
I believe it's all of them. I believe it is,
because I remember it was an honor when Ryak had his Primtalk, right? And had a, but I wasn't aware that all Jaffa needed a symbiote, but maybe that's the
and
case.
It might be that these were ones that they were part of that line. They were, these girls were, their father at least was, actual warrior versus just the servant.
Oh,
Jaffa. The people who did the metalworking and stuff like that.
Yeah. Also, you could also attribute that to the early season weirdness where you get these inconsistencies that don't get hammered out until later on.
Such as Apophis having a female Jaffa in the very first attack on the SGC in episode 1.
Yep.
But
yeah, whatever.
Who would have been under Teal'c's command because he was first prime, but yeah.
Well, Teal'c, as we see in this episode, does a very good job of conveniently forgetting things, like how he talks about his close relationship with his son, and I can't remember the last time we've seen him. It's like, okay, I guess that's all happening off screen, but
well, I think there have been times where he's been mentioned just as like a one line, Teal'c's off with Ryak, or Teal'c's off here, or Teal'c's off there.
Yeah, and it's, what about Drayak, your wife? It's like, oh yeah, she had this glorious, death, which all happened, I think, off screen, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
They're like,
pretty much.
I think she died in a tent, and then the tent got blown up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it also is a little bit awkward that, so obviously this episode sets up Teal'c's romance with Ishta, which I thought they were saying Ishtar, and it just made me think of that. that wonderful, amazing movie from the 80s. But he spends like this whole time like talking about how wonderful his wife is, and then it's like, all right, now let's get together.
A little clear awkward, the air.
Don't take your theology from this episode. It's no sin if you've lost someone to be with another. It's like, no, it's still a sin. It's still outside of marriage. Sorry.
Yep. You're wrong.
You can't be with the one you love. Love Jaffa you're with. Anyways. Yeah. So apparently Christopher Judge wrote this with Julian Blaylock in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess with one particular scene in mind, maybe, or two.
Yeah.
And I guess there was another actress that he was considering, Victoria Pratt,
right,
if Julian Blaylock wasn't available. And Victoria Pratt was in Mutant X and Cleopatra 2525, which were two of those kind of like cheesy.
Nice.
And so it's I think he, at the time at least, definitely had a type.
Well, and this was right before season 3 of Enterprise. This actually aired like a month before season 3 started of Enterprise. So they kind of hit it just right for being able to get her to come in for this. But yeah, he wanted her. You can imagine he'd watch Enterprise and go, I want her in an episode so I can smooch her.
Yeah. and I guess the smooching scene, at least the first one, they cut off after just a second or two. But apparently the actors went on a little bit more than that. And after the scene, Christopher Judge went up to Peter West and said, you got to cut that scene off early, right? Because apparently he had a deal with his significant other at the time that any sort of on-screen smooching wouldn't go past a certain point. And so they obviously it being Stargate, they would have cut it off soon anyways. But yeah, so apparently there's a longer version of that scene.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
stuff you learn by reading or by watching the commentary.
Did Christopher Judge do the commentary for this one?
No, it was the director of photography, and then the two art or set scenery people who've been with the show the entire time, and they were very proud of their tents and
very intense about their tents.
Yes. And I guess it rained the entire time of the shoot, so they're always like ducking around trying to get light and stuff. And there's spots too where you can see there's lots of mud, in the little combat ring, that there's all kinds of mud there and stuff. So that makes sense. Yeah, and the combat ring was an interesting set as well, because they walk up to it along this path, and there's all these like pseudo dream catcher, pieces of art, round things hanging from the trees. I thought that was very, very cool. A lot of those are $2 hula hoops wrapped in fabric, they said.
Yeah, they're basically, they're like the frames that people use when they do like cross stitch and stuff like that they just
embroidery hoops and stuff like that.
Yep.
But it was cool looking. The mud was a big problem, the rain, but not actually filmed at the same Vancouver nature preserve that they use. This was actually a old gravel pit that had started to be turned back into a forest and stuff. So the lake that we see briefly is the lake from the gravel pit. And
wow, they actually found another location to shoot.
Yeah, and the owner's like literally half a kilometer from the U.S. border.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and the owner was pretty cool about them like chopping down trees and stuff on the property, whereas you probably wouldn't get that at the nature preserve in Vancouver.
No. So it's a different gravel pit, but at least it looks a bit different.
Yeah.
So nice. We didn't get a breaking away scene where they like throw things into the filled up pit though, so that would have been good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Teal'c, it's telegraphed so heavily as soon as Ishta shows up that she and Teal'c are going to have a thing, although it seemed like Jack was really gunning for something too. They make the comment about the Amazons capturing men to mate with them, and Jack
and
going
Daniel's
on
like,
about
was that Daniel that said something like, is that what they have intended for us?
Yeah.
And Jack's just like, I like helping people.
Yeah. Of course, they're all beautiful women, so I mean, don't blame them. But
yeah, he's you have to have their fight scene, which I feel like did not age well. This is like definitely mid 2000s sci-fi TV action scene, and of course, I feel like the one time my wife comes into the room while I'm watching Stargate, it's that scene. It's just like,
oh, that's funny.
What are you watching?
What are you watching? I'm like, I promise it's just Stargate.
It's for work.
Yeah, there you go.
Research for a podcast.
Yeah.
But everybody knows capoeira in the early 2000s fight scenes. Yeah, apparently Julian Blaylock did around half of her own stunt work, and then they had a 17 or 19-year-old stunt double to do more of the martial arts.
Like the actual flips and things like that.
Interesting.
But yeah, there are definitely plenty of camera angles where they implied that something happened, but nothing actually did happen type.
Yeah.
Oh, she just backed off after getting hit, and, you could just imply that,
Yeah, definitely. And I would be interested to hear, I looked up before we started recording if she'd done any interviews about this, and I couldn't find anything. But I know that it seems like she is completely sworn off any sort of acting or interfacing with like science fiction fans, and I feel like we can probably imagine why. So
yeah,
on behalf of all non-creeps, we apologize to
exactly
to her.
On behalf of the creeps too.
Yeah.
We're not taking responsibility.
No, we're not.
No.
Yeah. So John Hughes, the director, was also someone who kind of left Hollywood. I think it's at a certain point, certain people, when they have a family of their own, they realize that they need to get kind of as far away from those people in that environment, and so a lot of people stop acting at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, it's probably for the best.
Yeah. Someone who didn't stop acting, though, who is in this episode, is Christine Adams, who plays Mala, who is the unsuccessful Trutonin recipient. And she's been in literally everything. Well, not literally everything, but very recognizable voice. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Black Lightning, other shows, pretty much anything filmed in Vancouver. So it was good to see her, and she definitely brought, some gravitas and, sympathy and pathos to her scene, where she volunteers basically to receive the Trutonin, and as we mentioned, she's the one who it doesn't go well for.
Yep.
And I like that they don't give us any sort of either Deus Ex Machina where she's magically healed or a real explanation for why it didn't work. Because with something like this, realistically, you'd have issues with these trials and you would have questions up in the air. So I like that they stuck with that. And it also gives more weight to the fact that there is a sacrifice that the Jaffa have to make to move away from their dependence upon symbiotes.
Yeah, they don't shy away from her death, and it has to be revealed at the worst possible time for SG-1, where is it Neith is challenging Ishta's supremacy over the tribe, and because they feel that Ishta has been foolish, doubling down on Trutonin versus the symbiotes, and just as this comes to a head, Daniel tells them that if one of their own has died in the process, so not great timing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that sets off the whole chain of events where Ishta and Neith go off to get a symbiote for Neith's younger sister who needs one or she's going to die.
Right.
And the sister's whole thing is she's been talking to Daniel, and Daniel has convinced her that she should try the path of the Trutonin.
No, Daniel's not talking to anyone.
Oh, yeah.
He's just talking to the air.
He's just talking to the air.
And she's not talking to anyone either.
It was a nice scene.
That was.
Yeah. And, then she comes to visit Daniel in the tent at, staff weapon point and says that she doesn't want someone else to die so that she might live. And is it Daniel who says, I ask you to choose life at that point? So that was nice. Don't know what Christopher Judge's politics are on the subject, but there were some overt and less overt pro-life messages in this.
There was, although this is something I've noticed in other pieces of fiction where you end up getting a very pro-life message, but I think because it's science fiction, there's a level of separation that the writers sometimes don't get. And I like to think that's just people's natural humanity coming through, where if you don't put it through a political lens, it makes sense.
Yeah, Kevin Sorbo mentioned that he would almost get into screaming matches with his female co-stars on Andromeda over the abortion issue if it came up while they were on set rehearsing. So
interesting.
Yeah, he mentioned that in I think the interview he did with the Babylon Bee podcast. I'm not sure, but
could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting though when it does creep through. Again, something like this where the same people who would fight for abortion off screen would also write these lines about choosing life and that we shouldn't take another person's life to save another and things like that.
Or burning unwanted children alive is evil.
Yeah. Especially the girl ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very, very applicable. But I do think that once you put that in a fictional context, especially a science fiction context where it's got several levels of separation from the real world, I think people's natural reaction to something like that come through.
Right. So, exactly.
Yeah.
There is hope there, and I feel like this is one of the best ways to convey those kinds of messages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not like the Orville either, where it's very on the nose what the current issue of the day is, that Seth MacFarlane is addressing.
Yeah.
And as you see in a couple first few seasons of the Orville.
Yep, exactly.
Not actually watched the Orville. I've heard it's okay.
It's good. It's fun. It's Seth MacFarlane, so it's crass in places. But
sometimes hilariously so. Sometimes cringeworthy, but at other times, the off-color humor works very well. I haven't seen all of the show though. I think I've only seen the first season and a half. I think, but
yeah,
need to go back and finish it up.
Yeah, season 3 is good.
I've heard that he basically transitioned it into a more dramatic show as like his stealth
what he
Star
wanted
Trek show, basically.
It's what he wanted in the first place. He wanted to do. He wanted to direct Star Trek. He wanted to, be a showrunner of a new Star Trek series. And Paramount basically told him to pound sand. And so he's like, "Fine, I'll go over to Fox and I'll convince them to let me do it there. We'll just use a different name,
and I'll hire Brandon Braga." And
yeah.
Rick. I don't know if Rick Berman was along, but he did get Brandon Braga along too.
He did get Brandon Braga. I think he got the what's the couple that do the scientific advising, Denise.
The Akutas.
Akutas. They were involved. Okay.
Robert Duncan McNeil does a lot of directing for that. So
I think, Jonathan Frakes, if I remember right, he does an episode or two of directing. So, there's some crossover there. But of course, we're not talking about that.
No. Off topic.
We're kind of stretching because we've kind of, there isn't a lot that goes on this episode. It is a plot advancement episode, but that just means there's a lot of talking.
Yes. And I like this episode, but my biggest issue is I feel like we spend too much time on Teal'c and Ishta, which is not really the interesting aspect of this episode.
It was for Christopher Judge.
Yeah.
You can tell he wrote this one.
And there's go ahead.
I was going to say Mala is the most interesting character in this entire episode. And she gets like a couple of scenes. Like I want to know more about her. And I feel like we could have spent more time on the actual issue here, which is switching people from symbiotes to Tritonin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And one thing we do have at the end, so we've got Neith, who is the sister of Nyssa, literal biological sister, not just, spiritual sister, opposed. And then when the time comes, Nyssa convinces her to take the Tritonin, and she's able to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that's I kind of like that scene actually where Neith goes, you betrayed me, and Nyssa said, "No, you're betraying me by not doing this. You're willing to die instead of do this."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we forgot the turning point. So Ishta is basically, after Mala dies, Ishta is back on board 100% with killing Jaffa to get their symbiotes.
Mm-hmm.
And what convinces her is they go to a planet, they attack some Jaffa, which I like how you get the juxtaposition of they have like horses and cartwheels and then like laser staffs. I just always, I always find that kind of funny. But as she's about to kill a wounded Jaffa to harvest his symbiote, he says they're like, can't remember what it was exactly.
Teal'c Nemron.
Yes, they're
I die free, or
right. They're Rage Against the Machine, Take the Power back line.
I was thinking, Queen, I want to break free.
Yeah.
I want to die free. Yeah.
But I guess it's their Don't Tread on Me would be a better analogy. But he says that, and she realizes that, hey, a lot of these Jaffa who are still enlisted and enslaved by the ghoul are probably on our side, which I like that I think they did that in an effective way, but it's also like you didn't realize this. You were once part of them anyway. So, and I guess you could chalk that up to denial.
I mean, she was a temple priestess or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's, and of course there are mixed, because the opening scene is there's a Jaffa who wants to defect, who is giving information to SG-1, and then they're ambushed by Jaffa, and then those Jaffa are ambushed by the female Jaffa. So there are those who are still willing to fight against the rebels.
True.
Yeah, I did like that scene because the female Jaffa unleashed so many staff blasts. It looks like it's like a Gatling gun or something.
Yeah.
And then there's so much smoke and cordite in the air, and all of a sudden they just kind of emerge from the smoke, and it's a very cool shot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's impressive. Where you just see these bushes just getting annihilated by the staff blasts. It's like, oh well, there's nothing left there.
Nope. Did you have any other thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, this is apparently, according to an interview, this is on IMDb, that Christopher Judge ran into Julian Blaylock in the makeup trailer, and she was having some trouble with the lines, as you do if you're on Stargate. And Christopher Judge, jokingly said, like, "I wrote these lines for you, and you can't even learn them," or something. And then he left, and then Julian Blaylock got to the set and was apparently like in tears, because Christopher Judge had yelled at her or something. And, the producers are like, "What did you say to her?" And he's like, "It was a joke." Yeah. So
oops.
If you're a writer and a star of a show, there's certain, with great power comes great responsibility, especially if you're a jokester. But I can imagine, the central cast of SG-1 joking around like that,
Yeah. And that's probably what he was used to,
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like if you're a guest star and Christopher Judge is calling you out, he's a rather imposing fellow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't want him mad at me.
Don't hurt me.
Yeah. Did we have any alternate language titles for this episode,
Yeah,
Victor?
in most cases, it was, Birthright. In French, we got les Amazones, or the Amazons in French. In Czech, we got Pravo Nazrození, which means the right to be born. So they were pretty more upfront with the pro-life message, at least in their title.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah, the right to be born.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
awesome. We do have some feedback.
Oh,
excellent.
Cool.
Paul Leone commented on our episode on Enemy Mine. He said, "It was a decent episode as I remember it, and Brotherhood of the Wolf is an excellent, highly recommended, best 18th century France kung fu conspiracy thriller movie of all time." And if there's more than one, I would gladly.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a pretty narrow group of movies.
And we should mention that longtime listener, friend of the show, Paul Leone, is himself an author who writes a lot of like historical, supernatural mashup fiction. So if you like the idea of, popes fighting using kung fu, or vampires in 18th century England, that sort of thing, check out some of his books because they're all very inventive and very
fun.
Yeah, very fun, I would say. Yeah, easy to read. Good if you're just like settling in and just need a good short story.
Yeah, no, they're really good. And I feel like if you're the kind of person who listens to podcasts about 20-plus-year-old science fiction shows, it's going to be right up your alley.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah. We have another comment on our episode on Space Race. Hammond says, "I get how people can feel that this is a pointless episode, but I like it. It's a fun tangent and kind of refreshing to see an alien planet that doesn't look like a gravel pit in Vancouver." Speaking of gravel pits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I think my biggest problem with it is that when I think of it, I keep getting it confused with the Voyager episode because they're so similar. But I liked it, and I feel like it had that almost like RoboCop satire with the advertisements and stuff. So that was fun. Awesome. Before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secret to Stargate, including Daniel K., Margaret G., James M., Chris and Angela E., and Ann 8. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secret to Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and you can find the video versions at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And to find previous episodes of Secret to Stargate and to send us feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate, where you can email us at stargate@sqpn.com, and follow the StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on Twitter, or I guess X now, at SQPN. And you can also join us over at our Discord at sqpn.com/Discord. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episodes of SG-1, Evolution Parts 1 and 2. Until then, Father Cory, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secret to Stargate.
Thank you, Jack. And since we're recording this during the last week of December, a belated Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. And Victor Lambs, thank you too.
Thanks, Jack, and Jelkek Nemron.
I don't know what the response would be, but...
And with your spirit.
And with your spirit. And with your spirit, there we go. Once again, I'm Jack Baruzzini. Thank you for listening to The Secret to Stargate on StarQuest.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?